Hi, I'm Dr. Cindy Dupuy. I have a PhD in learning disabilities. I do diagnostic assessment, advocacy, and intervention. I'm also an adult with dyslexia and dysgraphia.
My name is Kim Sharman. I work with kids with dyslexia, dysgraphia, and ADHD, and I too am an adult with ADHD.
Hi, my name is Tiffany, and I also work with kids with dyslexia, dysgraphia, and ADHD, and I'm also an adult with ADHD.
All right, so today, Kim, we're doing an overview of letter types,
Mhm.
six syllable types, and then we're going to briefly kind of look over the rules of syllable division. But why don't you do a reset? Remember where we were last time?
Okay. Remember where we were last time? I discussed the pyramid of language and how we have three different levels of language. We have Anglo-Saxon on the bottom, Latin in the middle,
Mhm.
and Greek on top. Anglo-Saxon level of language is 25% of our language. However, we speak it 80% of the time, and often kids in elementary school will memorize that level of language. Latin is 65% of our language used for middle school, high school, college, graduate school, and then at the top is Greek, 10% used for science and medicine.
Okay,
Um,
so now we're going to talk about letter types. So why don't you pull up your letter board for us?
okay, so here is what I'm going to show. Um, okay, this should look all familiar to everybody, and it's basically identifying by color the difference between consonants and vowels. You would be surprised how many kids don't know the difference between a consonant and a vowel. So
And
your
how
first,
would you test that, Kim? How would you test that in a kid?
well, what I would do, I perhaps would draw a fake word, like a word they have not memorized, like ZAF, Z-A-F, and ask them to underline the vowel.
Okay, excellent. Okay, and why is it important to know the difference between a consonant and a vowel?
It's critical to understand the difference between a consonant and vowel because vowels um, impact your decoding or chopping up of a word. And you have to be able to identify vowels and vowel teams in order to break a word into pieces in order to decode it.
What a brilliant lead in to the six syllable types. So
Okay.
why don't you pull in and we're going to identify six syllable types and understand that there's another curriculum that teaches a different way, and we'll talk about that at the end. But go ahead and give us the overview here.
Okay. When I talk to teachers and say, listen, all we need to do is teach the six syllable types and the four ways to divide syllables. Okay. This is what I mean. The first type of syllable is a closed syllable. And what this means is the vowel consonant makes the baby short sound, ah, eh, I, ah, and the way that works is you can see that there's a consonant following the vowel. So vowel consonant is the description of it.
So these are words like dog, cat, or nutmeg, or fantastic. Excellent. Next.
Open syllables, as we talked about before, vowels behave differently depending on how they are broken up in a word and whether a consonant is following them. These are called open syllables and they make the long sounds tiger, hey, low.
Beautiful.
The third type of syllable, so this would be an open, we call them open syllables. The third type of syllable you've all heard of magic E, silent E, vowel consonant E. The E after it's a vowel consonant E, and that E at the end makes the vowel say its name.
Okay.
So fame. Okay. Phonograms are the tricky part, and there's a bunch of them. We learn those gradually through the years, and these phonograms are not always the most frequent, but they are deposits of language left by other countries in the English language. It's important to know these because you have to be able to identify them when you're breaking a word into pieces.
And these are sometimes called vowel teams in different curriculums.
Letter combinations, these are, or welded letters, these are different combinations of vowels and consonant, which together form an individual's, like a sound. And oftentimes these aren't taught, especially when you look at some of the Latin versions of these. Even kids in high school, I'll ask them to read this and they don't know how to decode this or read this suffix that comes at, and by the way, it's shun, like for magician, okay? And then finally, we have silent E syllables that compose a chunk or a syllable type in many different words, especially in Anglo-Saxon language.
Also known as consonant LE. And then the other syllable type that you will see like in the Wilson rating system is an R controlled, which are AR, IR, OR, ER,
You are.
UR, the
Mhm.
ers or whatever. Okay. So now that we know those syllable types, why are they important for syllable division?
Well, once you know these syllable types, easy peasy, you can teach kids how to decode. I tell them, I can teach you how to decode any word in the world if you understand your syllable types and the rules for dividing. So the first rule is I will divide between two consonants. What I have the kids do, I have them underline the vowels in the words, and I'll say how many vowels are there or how vowel sounds, and they'll say two. So how many syllables are there? There's two. So they underline the vowels and they divide between the consonants. Okay, so I will divide between two consonants. The second and third are a little bit trickier, and this has to do with open syllables. This is I will divide before a single consonant. So they would underline the I and the ER, and they see there's one consonant and they'll divide before. The third is if I don't recognize the word, and this doesn't happen as often, I will divide after a consonant, a single. So you see here, this is not cabin. If I divide it before the B, it's cabin. And then lastly, and this happens often, is I will divide between two vowels. Once again, it's important to know your vowel teams so that you can have a better understanding of underlining the I and O and dividing between the two.
All right, well, let's give Tiffany, that's beautiful. Let's give Tiffany a little example here. Why don't you pull out a piece of paper?
Okay.
And let's write down the word 7 and see if Tiffany knows where to divide it.
Oh, I should give her the rules so she can see it.
I think Tiffany's got the rules, but let's see. Tiffany, where would you?
So looking at it, we have the two E's, and so I would divide it between the E and the B, the first E and the B.
Okay.
Okay. So what would that say?
7.
I would say seven.
Bin. Okay.
So this is one of those where it follows that third rule.
So
I will divide after a single consonant.
Now do you recognize the word?
Now it would be 7 instead of 7.
Beautiful.
And that's perfect. And that's exactly what we have to teach. And you have to teach these rules, not rules, but you have to also teach kids that they have to have flexibility in dividing these together. So it's
yeah, this is a great example of how somebody with a very high education level, because Tiffany has a master's degree, didn't know how to divide the word. And this is how teaching this helps all kids be better readers and better spellers. And with that, we'll look to see you again soon.
Bye.